Hi, everybody. It's great to see the list of names. I have some friends listed there, some students listed there. Hello, Lara. Hello, Shelley. Aggie. Aggie, you want to go to a pub night, a trivia pub night? And I see somebody is from Caledon. That was my first teaching job, 1976. A long time ago, I taught at Caledon Central Public School. And here I am talking to somebody from Caledon. It might be one of my former students, but it's great to see that across the nation participants. And my topic is the title of my book, Teaching Tough Topics. I'm just going to give you an overview of how I came to this book, look at three questions: why tough topics, what are tough topics, and how we can teach these topics. Um, the project began when I was asked to do some book lists for Indigo Publishers, actually, looking at multicultural books. And so I started gathering some resources, and while I was doing that, it just became interested, just exploded, and I was trying to find a framework for that. So that inspired it, and I teach at OISUT and teacher candidates, and I can't tell you the number of students who come knocking on my door. Larry, have you got a book to teach about Black History Month? Larry, have you got a book to teach about poverty or bullying? So it certainly was a need for my students. They recognized a need to teach these issues in their classroom. So that inspired this book. And children's literature has always been at my heart. Other books that I've written, Creating Caring Classrooms and Take Me to Your Readers, have literature at the foundation. But I was actually very excited to have this framework to think about how we might teach these tough topics. And why do we want to teach these tough topics? We live in a challenging world. Get into groups and discuss, folks. So certainly the times that we have lived through and are living through now are challenging times. So we want to help our students respect differences and be recognizing of the differences of others. I think it's about building compassion, and I think there's an essential need for that, not only understanding, but the compassion. And we want to find a place for equity. The subtitle of this book is How Do I Use Children's Literature to Build a Deeper Understanding Social Justice, Equity, and Diversity? So that is sort of the premise, the foundation, the seeds of the book. So as teachers, we have our mandated curriculum where we have to teach science and social studies and math, but we also have to find a place to bring the world into the classroom. And some of these top topics that teachers might be nervous about teaching or not prepared to teach. But I think if we want to create caring citizens of the world and deepen the understanding of social justice issues, I think we do have to pay attention and find a place in the curriculum where we can address these tough topics. So that was the foundation and a little rationale of why I chose this book. And then the topics. That was, I want to pay tribute to my editor, Kate Revington, who passed away recently. This was her final resource that she worked on, but she worked really, really hard with me, as every good editor does. And we came up with these topics to support teachers. I think we have the list of topics there, Lionel. Okay, so race and diverse cultures, the immigrant and refugee experience, indigenous identities, the Holocaust, physical and mental challenges, poverty, death, loss, and remembrance, gender identity and homophobia, bullying, and ripples of kindness. So I know you can read the list, but as I read this list, I wonder which ones you feel comfortable about teaching or more comfortable over others. Which ones have you taught? And then the other challenging question is, what do you consider a tough topic to teach? And why is it a tough topic to teach? So I think we have to look at context. In the introduction of my book, I talked about a bully issue that was emerging in the school that I was at. So I brought books into the classroom to help the kids understood or confront the bullying issue. So there was a need in my classroom. Unfortunately, there was, I'm going back to the year I was teaching grade 4, 36 students. A girl in my class, Deepa Harpalani, was in the Air India crash on a Sunday. It was the last week of school. And on the Monday, the principal announced the news that she was on that Air India crash. And so, how do you discuss these issues with the student? So, sometimes there's an urgent need. Sometimes it just emerges from the questions the kids have. Many times it comes from the books that you're reading. And I think in 2020, absolutely, there are so many issues that need to be unpacked, and we need to gather around and discuss those issues. Of course, we've got the screen now to discuss it, but how do we invite students to think about them, those issues, and challenge their thinking about it? So just think about those. I'm going to delve into one before my time is finished today. But why children's literature? So here's my premise of the book in a nutshell. I think with a book, we can start to open up those discussions. If you're nervous about teaching Indigenous identities, nervous about the Holocaust, or any of those, start with a book, a picture book, a novel, even a poem, nonfiction book, because that can start your discussion and open up those topics. So when we want to approach a tough topic, we want to gather resources. And my gift to you is just start with a children's book. I'm going to give you a list today of some that have been my favorites to support this initiative. And I'll talk about that when we look at some books before I go today. So I think we've got a book can help kids make connections. When we share a title, what is this book saying to me? How do I connect? We call it text to self connections in the world of comprehension. But what does this book say to me? How does it help me reveal my own stories? I think a good book raises questions for the students, lets them want to find out more about a topic, which can lead to inquiry. I think we can have meaningful discussions in our classroom, whether they're gathered together in the rug or small groups or perhaps one-on-one. So I think a good book allows us to have those conversations. A good book that connects to tough topics help us learn about the identities of others. And earlier I talked about compassion and recognition of differences, but at the same time that helps them reflect on their own differences. And in the classroom then, a book helps us frame our literacy programming. So how do we invite reading, writing, talk, media, and arts response? I think a good book for a tough topic in particular provides a case study where students can explore those issues. So if a student has a physical challenge in a book, then how can that serve as a case study for how it's dealt with? So that's a rationale of why we want to explore it through children's literature. I'm going to give you an overview of the chapter, and I think you'll see why I don't have to defend this one or articulate why, but our race and diverse cultures seems to be like exploding in our understanding of what's happening in the world today. And that just by coincidence happens to be chapter 1 in the book. There's many cultures that we want to explore, but we want to look at the identities of others. And I think that's a nice place to begin with race. So I just want to give you an overview of the chapters, and this is in each chapter. In each chapter, I give you an essay that talks about my own experiences and a rationale while I came to the topic. And from there, I move into perspectives. I have some experts in the field. In this case, I have a colleague, Michelle Grace Williams and Marie Jose Botello, who look at children's literature and who look at anti-discriminatory education. And they put their thoughts to give us some expert perspectives. Each chapter has that. And my friend Aggie, who might be listening to me at the moment, she contributed to the chapter about the Holocaust and examining religious differences. So I called upon friends and my colleagues at OISE. Then we move into the language and vocabulary. I think it's important for each topic to have the kids explore terms that they might not be familiar with and really give them a foundation. So for example, in this chapter, what does race mean? What is racism? So I usually do an activity or some definitions to help give the the students some insights into that particular issue. Then I think it's important to open up the topic. Where are we going to, your mind's on activity? How are we going to inspire thinking in the classroom? So each chapter has an activity that does that. I'm going to give you a taste of one in a moment. But I'm calling it opening up the topic, giving different situations. And each chapter, which is the heart of the chapter, has two different literature sources. In this particular chapter, I use the picture book The Other Side by Jacqueline Woodson, and I use a script that's a Canadian script by Dennis Foon. So I try to use the range of genres throughout the book. You will see picture books, you will see poetry, nonfiction, you will see photographs represented to show you the different texts that we can use. And for each of those genres, I provide strategies. So comprehension strategies, teaching strategies to dig inside the book and continue and deepen those discussions. And my favorite thing to do is finishing off each chapter with great books, book lists. So each chapter finishes off with a list of titles that I recommend. And it's always evolving. And I enjoy doing that. The thing about this, and it's just coming to my head, I read every single one of these books. I own nearly all of them because it wasn't just going on and looking for some titles. I really immersed myself in finding books and reading books that can help me give authenticity to it. And of course, I'm just a little bit different. Some colleagues recommended some books to me as well in those titles. But these are books that fill the bookshelves in my office. That's a chapter overview. I want to give you a taste of, Lionel, can we show that slide about race and racism? Do you have that one? So this is an activity that invites kids to think about racism. And it's a reproducible master. You can you can cut these up in envelopes and give one scenario to each student. I call it a minds-on activity in this case. And there's a page full of them. And I think you'll be getting a copy of the page. But I wanted to give you a taste of an activity. And it'd be great if we were able to turn to our partners and talk about it. But think if you were talking to your kids, I'll use grade 6 as a middle ground there. What if you witnessed someone spray painting a piece of racist graffiti in your neighborhood? What if someone called you a bad name when you were walking down the hall of your school? What if you saw someone on a bus turn or walk away from someone with a different skin color? What if you or a friend who was a minority received anonymous emails that make racist comments? The messages were ignored at first, but over a month, they got worse. So I would give the children a chance to respond, perhaps write the response, perhaps do turn and talk to a neighbor or small groups, or it could be one that we discuss with the whole class. There's a page of them. I think there's 18. So you can decide whether you want the kids to look at them individually. Here's another one I want to add. It's not on the handout. What if you were in a supermarket and you witnessed a customer yell at an employee and say, "Go back to your country"? You're in a supermarket and you hear somebody yell at one of the employees, "Go back to your country." Now that's on my page, but it was in the news this week in Mississauga, Ontario. It's in the video. I watched it on the news this morning. So here we are in 2020 trying to deal with these issues. And racism is certainly not a 2020 phenomenon that we need to explore. But how would you answer that question? What would you say if you were in that supermarket? And would you have the courage to say anything? How do we help students? How do we, as adults, become upstanders as well? And so I just took that scenario because I found that it was interesting as well. So that is just an example of something practical to do that involves some talk or some writing. And I just want to finish off with talking about a few of my favorite books. Lionel, maybe do you have the book list or to show them now or not?
Just went out.
Okay, so you're getting a book list, and I just want to see what I gave you. So for each of my top topics, If you can see it, if you want to open it, this is yours for the asking there. Um, so for each of the tough topics, I did a picture book recommendation and a fictional recommendation. So I took some of my best and current titles, and just to give you an overview. And the second page, which I won't get to today, is more picture books and more fiction, which I just keep adding to all the time. So if you were interested in looking at a particular topic, and I picture books for all ages, not just primary and junior, but um, how do we use picture books across the curriculum? There's an example of how um, I recommended some titles, and I'd love you to use the titles. At the top of the page, I just want to make reference to one more thing. I do have a website, larryswartz.ca, Dr. Larry Recommends. That's a free resource. Once a month, I post titles that I've been reading and recommending. And during this period of isolation, I'm on novel number 63. I've read 63 books since March the 1st. Some are adult books, some are kids' books, but each month I post titles, and you will see a great list there for the topic of Black Lives Matters with some annotations as well. So I've got some picture books sitting by my side. And novels. I'm just going to share a few with you to just finish off with my last couple of minutes. Actually, can I just have another hour and a half there, Lionel? Is it okay? Because I just want to talk about books.
I knew you were going to say that, Larry, and I speak for the other two presenters when I say no.
Oh, Adrian, give me 10 minutes of your time. Here we go. I don't know if you can. Okay, I know you can't see the covers, but I put this in the Indigenous titles, a Canadian book called Stolen Words. And since we're all friends here, I think one of the toughest topics for Larry is exploring the Indigenous identity. And like many teachers, we're nervous that we are saying the wrong things or don't have the right information. But start with a book. This book gives me support and understanding that can open up inquiry. The story of a girl who learns from her grandfather who had once been in residential schools. There are many titles that support this. So you might read this on Monday in your classroom. Let's look at another title so they can make a text-to-text connection. I did mention The Other Side. This book, I know you can't see the covers. I'm not doing a great job. I should have made slides, maybe next time. But Jacqueline Woodson is just a hero for children's literature. She's written picture books and novels. But when I was doing the book and the chapter on racism, I went into a grade 3 class and read this book that recently celebrated its 20th anniversary. So even, I know you can't see it a close up, but you've got a fence there with a black girl on one side of the fence and a white girl on the other side of the fence. So who's on the other side? How do these girls get segregated? What do their parents think, and how will they ever come together? So I raised those questions with the students to explore race. And for the theme of immigration, I'm very fond of the book Out. I just want to show you the title, Out. And this is about a girl and her mother who came from, it's an unidentified country, but they are refugees, and the father is left behind in the homeland. I had a great experience with a grade 6 class responding to that book. The issue of death. I just had a class this afternoon with my students, and they talked about how it's hard to talk about death. And I said, well, let the books do that. So this is a Canadian book by Eric Walters, a picture book, Always With You, a tribute where the author looks at the character and pays tribute to her grandfather. So I think a book like that inspires kids to think about whether they're thinking about a relative, unfortunately, who's passed away, or they talk about their goldfish. I use this for personal narratives in my chapter, and the students do an amazing job of revealing the stories once I reveal a story that I think about when I read this book. So I went into a 4th grade class in Toronto. I went in with this book, and I started with my own story about my nephew. Ironically, 6 years ago today, I gave the eulogy for my nephew, Solomon, who passed away of cancer. And so I'm paying tribute as I hold up this book today. But this is the book, and I'm going to tell you my story. Do you have stories to tell? So we have to find a culture where kids feel comfortable sharing stories with each other, in this case, with the tough topic of death. And once they told their stories, they might want to read the stories. I have write their stories. I have a very strong belief that talk precedes writing. So personal narrative has been a gift for us for helping us explore issues, and we want kids to tell stories. The day the war came is you can get the complete text from the Guardian newspaper. I think this is one of my top three books that looks at the refugee experience. I can't do justice to it, but it is about a story of a girl who was not allowed to enter a classroom because there's no room for you. So I leave that to you to explore. And I think I've shared this with over 1,000 people. Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress. I've touched kindergarten to my adult students and in workshop presentations. It's about a boy who wants to wear a tangerine dress because it's the color of his mother's hair, because it's the color of the sun and the color of tigers. And so he's adamant that he's going to wear this dress to school. He allows his mother to paint his nails pink. And of course, in this preschool kindergarten setting, kids make fun of him, but he stands up to those bullies. So hooray for this Canadian book, and that looks at gender identity issues. Here's what I just finished on the weekend. The book's called Rick by Alex Gino. You might know the book George that she's written that looks at transgender children. It's about a girl, sort of grade 4, I'll call it grade 4. And so George was about this girl who knew that he was a girl. I get my pronouns mixed up. Oh dear, I'm getting so mixed up with that. I apologize for that. But she's a great hero for looking at sexual identity with kids. And her newest book is called Rick. And he doesn't know whether he likes girls. He doesn't know whether he likes boys. So he joins the Rainbow Club in the school and just looks at different identities that the kids in that club have. And she empowers the student, gives those teenagers some understanding. And I will finish off with one last book. The book is called Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker's Road. Every student in grade 5 up has to read Ghost Boys. Everybody who's listening to me has to read this book. I bought it 2 years ago. I read it in 2018-19. I reread this on the weekend because I knew I was going to chat with you. I ordered another copy. On page 1, a black boy is shot by a white policeman. The white policeman thinks that the boy has a gun. And so there's not a spoiler alert because the boy dies and he goes up to heaven. And when he's in heaven, he meets hundreds, maybe thousands of black boys who were abused or treated because of their racial identities. So Emmett Till is a character that he identifies with. So isn't it strange? He goes up to heaven, and the book works. He's looking down on heaven as the policeman's trial goes to fruition, and the policeman is tried. And surprise, 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 no spoiler alert, the white policeman gets off and he's not charged for this crime of killing a 12-year-old black boy. So when we see the news, when we look at George Floyd, when we want to help kids understand and unpack tough topics, to make those connections, to raise those questions, a book can do that. And thank you for listening to me to begin this session.